Would you please stand now and say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sorry.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the agenda as presented and excuse the absence of John Zimmer.
Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Winter,
Yes.
Pieper, Martin,
Yes.
Byers,
Yes.
Chadwick,
Yes.
Trustee.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are going to move the public forum portion of the meeting to after the presentation on the return to school action plan, since I'm guessing that's why lots of you are here this evening. On the action agenda, the first thing we're going to talk about is the QC Puff refinance. Do I have a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the resolution authorizing the issuance of the district's Series 2020 limited tax obligation refunding bonds in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $2,600,000 to refund the district's Series 2015 limited tax obligation refunding bonds. Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to open this discussion topic up. So basically what we're doing is, on the basis of the interest rates dropping significantly in the bond market, we've been taking a look at our quality capital purpose undertaking fund bonds, or QC Puff is what we call them for short, and looking at the opportunity to refinance those. This is an opportune time to do that. So at $2.4 million of bonds, it makes good sense that if we can refinance and save the district good sum of money within our call window, which is between now and December, we want to make sure to take advantage of that opportunity. Very similar situation to which many of you would be utilizing if you were refinancing your home, except for in this case it's for QC Puff bonds. So I've asked Tobin Buchanan to get us information so we can analyze the information and ask questions tonight. I got information from both Piper Sandler and First National Capital. Tobin represents First National Capital, and gave them both the opportunity to run the refunding numbers, and First National Capital was able to offer a better savings rate. So I will let Tobin explain the process and what the next steps will be. And so in front of you, you should have a document that explains that to you from First National Capital. Tobin, I'll turn it over to you.
Excuse me, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Again, I'm Tobin Buchanan with First National Capital Markets. We are an affiliate of First National Bank of Omaha, which we have a branch here in town. So appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk to you a little bit about the potential savings, the bond market, possibly a procedure or a timeline that you decide to move forward with this. So we did begin visiting with Mr. Alexander probably in February on these QC Puff bonds, which technically have their 5-year anniversary call date on December 15th of this year. So that's technically the day you can refinance them. It's the 5-year date of when you closed on this last issue. But there is an opportunity to move sooner than that should the market indicate you should do so. So the main reason we're visiting tonight is if you decide to move forward, the bonds can be ready to go to move into the market sooner if the rates should indicate we should do so. I believe when Mr. Alexander and I visited in February, the potential savings on the $2.4 million in bonds was right around $150,000. Refinancing the current rate to a lower rate. And tonight we're showing you a scenario that looks like we're really right up against possibly that $300 savings range. So really double the savings from what we were visiting about in February. With all the unfortunate challenges that come with some of the things going on with districts and tonight in the world and with COVID, I guess one bright point is sometimes that does lead to least find a rainbow amongst all the gloom to save some good dollars. So I won't go into this any further than you would like me to. I guess I would point out that the current interest rate on the bonds, if you don't do anything, is just under 3%. And it looks like right now you can refinance them in the market at about 1.13%. So that's where you're seeing that significant savings. This scenario actually takes a lot of that savings and pushes it onto that very last bond that's due in 2031 and almost totally eliminates it. So you're getting very close to actually shortening the amount of time it will take you to eventually retire these bonds. Any questions you have about the bond market or the process or procedures that I can answer for you tonight?
Tobin, I have a question, I guess, in regards to the savings that you propose, or First National Capital proposes. Everything's on the basis of what we transferred in from the previous bond rate. But if we had equity available, we could also include that to pay down more of the principal and interest, correct?
Correct. So Mr. Alexander touched on the fact it's kind of like refinancing a home. So at this 5-year anniversary time, you can choose to do nothing. You can refinance. If you feel like you have some extra dollars in your QCPUF bond reserve amount, and it makes sense to apply that at this time and pay that down, then you're either going to shorten the amount you're borrowing or actually accelerate your savings even further we call it par, by paying down principal on what you would reissue as new bonds. And none of that has to be decided tonight. If you're considering moving forward with this resolution, it's called a parameter, in that it just allows through broad, it says 2.6 million, you're really probably going to do 2.4. It allows authorization to move forward and structure things as you all see fit before we would ever actually move into the market. So those conversations can continue to happen. We can run updates on what would it look like if you put an extra 50,000 down, how that impacts savings, things like that. So that would just continue to be part of the conversation and until we finally decided this is what we want to do, this is the right time to get in the market to realize this amount of savings.
Are there any other questions?
I guess I just have one other one. In terms of next steps, and I know you said this doesn't have to be the end, but so it would be prudent for us probably to continue the discussion and keep the resolution on the forefront, and then determine on the basis of what's in our quality capital purpose undertaking fund, what amount we could put forward towards that, have you run us more numbers, and finalize that once, if the resolution is approved this evening.
Correct. So passing a resolution actually doesn't obligate you to do anything. Now, I really don't believe this is going to happen. Let's say you pass the resolution and tomorrow the rates shoot all the way up and there's not enough savings for you to move forward. You just back off and wait, and you wait till the right time. The resolution just is providing authorization to get the ball rolling. It gives us the green light. I'll just put it this way to kind of put the whole bond issue together and be ready to move in the market as we communicate on the right time. So that's all you're considering tonight is allowing an authorization to move forward. There's really no additional meetings required to make some of these decisions. This puts into place the opportunity to allow Mr. Alexander, board president, to kind of have those conversations and bounce ideas off the board however you see fit to make the final decision of the right timing. Did that answer it?
Yes, thank you. So basically, for board members, if you'd like to move forward tonight, you have a motion on the table, you have a second. So you just need to have a vote to approve the motion as presented to move forward with keeping the discussion and approving the resolution as presented.
Could the secretary call a roll?
Pieper,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Chadwick,
Yes.
Trustee,
Yes.
Winter.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Tobin, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Be in
Have a
touch.
safe trip.
Thank you.
Next on the action agenda is the phone upgrade. Mr. Alexander's going to speak to that. Oh, wait, I need a motion first.
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the proposal for a telephone system from Diode Technologies as presented.
Second.
Now, Mr. Alexander.
Okay, as you know, our phone system fell prey to the lightning strike the other last Monday night here at the high school, which many items have fallen prey to, going to be a very expensive lightning strike. So we've in the process, issue 5 has been very good. Ryan McDowell, who is taking over as semi-new technology director, worked very quickly to get bids from 3 different people, 3 different companies to help us get that restored. Basically, the loop is not working. The entire controller for the high school, for the district phone system, sits here at the high school. So the controller was, as the lightning strike happened, one of the loops was completely knocked out, and it's old enough it's irreparable. So we've been looking at Allo, Voice by Fortinet, and then Zultis by Diode. Essentially, the nuts and bolts of it is that we had 3 different bids from 3 different companies, and the bid that comes in that makes the most sense is the Diode bid. Allo bid comes to roughly about $154,760 over a 5-year cost period when it's all added up together. Voice comes to about $80,993, but we would have to hire installation folks to install that. And then the Zultis Diode bill comes to about $84,000 over the 5-year cost, and installation can be done through Diode with the help of some of the issue 5 people. So the recommendation that I would make in short is that the Diode bid is the best quality of phones and also the most reasonably priced in installation and service. Issue number 5, Fairbury, and about 2 to 3 other schools that we did contact in the service area have some very good things to say about the Zulti phone. So that's the recommendation we make at this time, to replace the phone service, which hopefully we can get up and running before the start of school.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Jason, will we get any insurance even off of this lightning strike to offset some of those costs?
We will get insurance to offset. We have a $25,000 deductible. So the insurance will offset primarily most of the cost of all the other issues that we're having. We had a fire alarm panel that was struck, and it's an $8,500 panel. It was ruined. And then we also had 3 other electrical panels that were ruined that were about $7,000 a piece. And then we also had a high-frequency drive panel that controls the HVAC system that was lost, 2 heat pumps and cooling pumps on the ceiling. So by the time we get to our deductible, that's going to cover the majority of those costs, and then the insurance cost will cover the cost of the whole.
Any other questions? Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Martin,
Yes.
Byers,
Yes.
Chadwick,
Yes.
Trustee,
Yes.
Winter,
Yes.
Pieper.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next up is the Return to School Action Plan, and the speakers are Mr. Alexander and Dr. Nielsen. Do I have a motion?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 approve the 2020-2021 school reopening resolution as presented.
Second.
Okay, so with that, we're going to take some time this evening, and it is going to take some time to get completely through our reopening plan that we have put together. Before we do that, I'm terrible at sitting and talking, so I'm going to stand up, and not to offend anybody, but just that's the way I speak better. So we've been working on this plan, and before I get too far down the road, I want to say, first of all, thank you to all of you who took the time to show up out of your evening, to show up tonight and be a part of this. We just wanted to have an opportunity to have an open conversation with people who were interested in coming. Obviously, we're live streaming, so any of those that couldn't make it but wanted to get the information would have that opportunity as well. So this is just an opportunity for us to explain to you the plan and and tell you thank you, because I know that this time period is a time period where we have lived in a lot of uncertainty over the past several months, and that's uncertainty on our level, and especially on your level as well. So we've asked you to fill out surveys. We wanted to thank you for that. We've asked you to maintain a certain level of rationality, and we appreciate the understanding from the parents who have managed to do that, because I know it's not been easy sitting on pins and needles and waiting to figure out what was actually going to happen. But we also need you to understand that there's a certain amount of information that we have needed to be provided with in order to finalize our plans. And we'll talk about that in the presentation itself. But also, to those of you, I want to say sincere thanks to those of you who understand. We're talking about 2,200 students here and 357 staff members. So as much as we understand you think about your own child, who is very important, and we understand there are children, we are tasked with thinking about what's in the best interest of 2,200 students and 357 staff members and everybody that's involved. So I just want, as we move forward, I ask that you keep that in mind, and I thank you for those of you who have been doing that. The purpose of this meeting this evening is to show and explain the work that the administrative team and other district representatives, the hospital representatives, public health, law firms, and County Attorney Harris have been in contact with us multiple times, have been working on to outline the basics of the plan, answer questions, understand the next steps, and then, of course, adopt the resolution of the plan that you heard the board move to earlier. Before we get to the next slide, I just want to extend a huge thank you to the administrative team and to the teachers that came in this summer, gave of their time to volunteer to be part of a problem-solving process that, quite honestly, folks, has not been an easy problem to solve. They've been very thoughtful, they've been very dedicated, and they've been very conscientious about being concerned about what's best for students and what's best for staff as we plan to return, quite honestly, in a scenario that I don't think any of us ever imagined. So, to the administrative team that's here tonight and been working on it, you guys are the greatest. Thank you very much for your work. And for the teachers that are here tonight and been part of it and been involved or giving suggestions here and there through email, thank you so much for your efforts as well and being part of the solution as compared to part of the problem. So as we start planning, the planning process for anything, you start with the idea that you're going to go on a journey, and at the end of your journey, you're going to reach your goal. But the problem with COVID and the planning process for COVID is the reality is it's been anything but a straight line. You folks know this. The ups and downs, going forward 2 steps and backward 6 steps, finding out you're doing one thing, but then trying to have to go back and do that differently 2 days later. It's been a challenge. So, ideally, our team, when they build a plan to go on a journey, it looks like the top. We usually build a plan to look like the top scenario. But the reality is, this plan has been more like the bottom. What I would encourage you to remember is that our plan is our plan. It's not a plan for a school district on the western side of the state or out in the middle of the sandhills that may be completely different than our school. It's not a plan for the school district that's in the metro area because they're dealing with a whole different set of scenarios than we are. So although we've consulted with many school districts across the state, and a lot of the plans look similar, every single plan within a school district is designed to represent that particular school district, not another school district that's 45 minutes away or that's 3.5 hours away. So I ask that you keep that in mind. What this is tonight, this is a time for us to explain our plan, a time to ask questions, time to provide helpful insight, a time to gain an understanding, and a time to find the middle. Legitimately, this morning I had a phone call from a parent, knowing the parent meeting is coming tonight. At 8:55, one parent calls and says, "My kids are not coming to school if they have to wear masks." 8:57, the other parent calls, "My kids are not coming to school if you don't require them to wear masks." So folks, the reality is that somewhere in the middle is where we have to be to live together and to be able to accomplish what it is we want to accomplish. And the most important thing, and that's getting our kids back to school where we want them, for you and for us. Because I can promise you our staff wants to see kids back in school. This is not a personal attack time, okay? It's not a time to act irrationally. It's not a time to create polarity. It's not a time to be overly critical or not a time to be in an adversarial situation. And the reason for that is because there are plenty of obstacles that we have to work together on to get through. And the other thing that I would tell you is it's not my plan. I'm not the only one that created it. Dr. Nielsen, it's not her plan. It's not the Board of Education's plan. They're just in charge of making sure that we have a plan moving forward. Your feelings on the plan and where we're at in our world right now will greatly depend on your perspective. In other words, your experiences with COVID will greatly determine your feelings. If you are a person who has not had to deal with COVID, you've not been around it, you've been just minding your business, doing what you normally do on a day-to-day basis, haven't had to think about it, which fortunately in our world, here in Beatrice, that's where many of us are. But if you're a person who has lost a loved one, a person you care about, a relative, a friend, whatever the case may be, to COVID, then your perspective, your feelings are much different than someone else's. So as we move through this and we discuss these things, it's very important to remember that your feelings about the topics we're going to talk about may be different than the person that's next to you, but a lot of that's because of your experience with this particular pandemic. Some steps that we've taken in the process. As you know, in March, we were faced with the reality of uncertainty and closing school, which none of us really thought would come here. 2 weeks before that day happened on March 14th, I was standing in the middle school office talking to some of the middle school teachers about how we're not going to close school. We're never going to, it's not going to be our issue. Bam, 2 weeks later, it's our issue. In May, we start planning graduations in summer school, still not completely knowing what we're dealing with. June and July, we're establishing the COVID task force team. Folks, what I'm telling you is in college, to become an administrator, superintendent, the instruction manual for dealing with pandemics is pretty thin. It's non-existent, okay? So we're doing this, and it's the first time that many of us have ever done it. And we're learning things just like you are for the first time on what a pandemic is and how to manage it. So we've worked our way to the point where now, in the July board meeting, we thought we would be prepared to present a plan that would be finalized and ready to go for the board to approve. Nope, we're still waiting on guidance from the Nebraska Department of Education, and we're still waiting on information from legal counsel and many other people who are providing us guidance that we need to finalize the plan. Mid-July, we get to a point where we're ready now to disseminate the plan to all staff in the district for awareness and guidance. We've had multiple sets of people helping us. At the end of July, we have the board meeting to approve the plan and the resolution and get ready to send that out to the entire community. So that's where we are. Obviously, in August, as students return, we will start to implement the plan. Just a little bit about some of the partners. Our school district, our team, has collaborated with approximately 36 other schools. All the schools in the ESU 5 area, which is predominantly southeast Nebraska. The Nebraska Department of Education and an organization called STANCE that just basically represents kids all across the state and what's in their best interest. Some other formal guidance sources that we've consulted: the Nebraska Department of Education again, the CDC, Learning Policy Institute, the Nebraska Association of School Boards, Governor Ricketts, obviously through his directed health measures and the things that he has been working on. We've been in contact with him in his office, the Nebraska Council for School Administrators, KSB School of Law, the Nebraska Association of State Education Association, Perry Law Firm, of course the NSAA, which oversees our activities, and the Nebraska Federation of, or the National Federation of High School Sports, that will be giving us guidance moving forward. So, with that, that's a little background on where we are and what we've been doing. Now, as we start to unveil the plan, Dr. Nielsen will talk to you about the different tier levels, and we'll just be kicking this back and forth between you.
Okay, so as we look at how we make this plan, we created it based upon the tiered approach. We looked at 4 tiers. Our tiers look at tier 1 being no to low risk, no to low spread in our area and surrounding areas. Tier 2 is the moderate risk or spread. Tier 3, we start seeing the high risk or spread, and then tier 4, we start seeing cases in our class and in our buildings. Now, the question that has come up, and we'll talk about this, is what is the magic number for tier 4? What's going to close the building down? I will tell you at this point in time, we do not have that answer. It will depend. We may look at a classroom, and that might be what we look at. We may look at a whole building. We may look at the district. So we are working with Public Health Solutions on tiers as we move through and figuring out what is working for Beatrice. Because again, as we look at our Public Health Solutions area, Fairbury's in there, but Fairbury might be a little bit different than Beatrice, or Tri-County might be different than Beatrice. So we've got to figure out what's happening in Beatrice and where we are. Tier 1, as we look at tier 1, this is really a green area. The school is in session for 100% of our students. Staff are on campus. The schools has a plan. We're going to implement some of our pieces. The other things that we will look at are calendar options. And I will tell you, as you look at the calendar options, one of them was to start August 3rd. That's not going to happen. We are not starting August 3rd, so that calendar option is put aside. But another option that we have is to start after Labor Day. We would need a directive to start after Labor Day. So that would be a directive from the State Department of Education, or a directive from Governor Ricketts that says they're pushing back the start of school time. That is where that calendar would come into place. Otherwise, if we do not have a directive, August 12th is our start date. For Tier 2. Tier 2 is that moderate risk spread, so school is in session for all students, but we make adjustments. We make adjustments in schedules. We make adjustments in our classrooms, the lunchrooms, the hallways. We start figuring out how to kind of reduce the contact that our kids are having and how to make sure that we keep the environment safe for all kids. We also start, we are going to practice good hygiene no matter what tier we're in. Because that is one thing that we teach our kids from day one, is how long do you wash your hands, where do we cover our cough, and you do all of those things as you teach just a normal class. So tier 3 really starts pushing us to that high-risk spread. And this starts pushing us into a different view. We will be looking at a hybrid schedule, and we will share with you the hybrid schedule that Beatrice Public Schools will be using tonight, later on in the presentation. But this will be looking at creating a in-person and a virtual learning experience for kids. And we will be reducing, our goal with Tier 3 is to reduce our building capacity by 50% and our classroom capacity by 50%. So in order to meet those two, we have looked at one of the schedules, and that is where we will be moving if we hit in Tier 3. Tier 4 is that confirmed widespread COVID outbreak. This is where we will be going to remote learning. And again, like I said, it may be for 2 weeks, it may be for a semester, it may be for the rest of the year. We are not for sure. This will be with the help of Public Health Solutions, excuse me. This will be, we will work closely with them to determine what Beatrice is going to do and what Beatrice is going to look at. Now, I will tell you, I know in my case, I do not want to end up back in Tier 4. I know that remote learning for my child did not go the best that it should have. I know that there are some things that she probably didn't learn as well as, maybe another student, and I know it was difficult. As a working mom, I know it was difficult to make sure that my child was doing what she needed to do and staying on top of it. So, as working parents, we also understand that that is difficult too. So, but Tier 4 will be used for that, and if we need to, we will go to Tier 4.
Okay. That brings us to probably a question that many of you have going through your mind right now. And that is, how do we determine which tier we're in? Well, the main focus of this is going to relate back to the Public Health Solutions risk dial, which is a picture of it is right here in the corner of the presentation. Public Health Solutions is kind of the overwhelming or the overseeing public health entity in southeast Nebraska that tracks where we really will be in regards to the risk factors involved with the pandemic. And so, essentially, they have a risk dial that looks very similar to what our tiers do, and we will be utilizing that risk dial to determine where we are within our tiers. We'll also be using some other data points that are important to know. First and foremost, the first data point will be the prevalent cases in Beatrice Public Schools. Because although the risk dial is important, that's a conglomeration of what's going on in southeast Nebraska. If we have a huge outbreak of cases in Beatrice Public Schools, that may not necessarily be reflected on the risk dial. So we have to take a different approach. But that will be our first and foremost data point. The second thing, obviously, is the risk dial, and it will be updated every Friday. The risk dial is updated on Friday, so schools can make their plans for the coming week. Then we will look at prevalent cases in the hospital, prevalent cases in the city and community, and finally prevalent cases in the region. The risk dial itself assesses all of the items 3 through 5, but we will communicate with Public Health Solutions officials on a regular basis. Twice a week we have a meeting set up with them anyway, and if something else would rise to the top of importance level, we could be in contact with them as well. All right, within the plan, there are tenets that basically address everything school, whether that's screening, school operations, food service, cleaning facility. All the tenets that are within the plan, which is about a 60-page document, 50-page document, all of these items are addressed in detail. Now tonight, we're not here to cover all those in detail with you because we would be here till midnight. I know you're probably not interested in that. Neither are we. So we're going to take a 1,000-foot view of some of the more important tenets that we find within the plan itself and talk about those. So the first tenet that we talk about is the screening tenet. What does that actually mean? And what are we talking about? Well, screening means paying close attention to the general well-being of your child and their health on a day-to-day basis. Okay? So we're going to be asking you to pay attention to their temperature. Check the temperature. That's one of the leading factors or leading symptoms in the COVID, as many of you have heard. Ask them how they feel. Do they taste their food, etc.? We laughed today because we said, ask them how school lunch was. But no, don't ask them because we know what they're actually going to say. Okay? We've all been there. How do you do this? Invest in a thermometer and check their temperature at least twice a day. Check it before they go to school. Make sure they're good to go. Check it before they go to bed. Make sure they're good to go. That's a leading indicator that you need to be aware of. Before school and after school, if we're in tier 2 or tier 3, this is important to understand, we will do random checks, random screening of students when they arrive to school. In tier 2, it will be when they arrive to school. So we are going to randomly check students' temperatures when they come into school. Very similar process to what all the schools in the state are doing. So we will randomly screen students when they arrive. Be talking to them. How are you feeling today? Got to get your temperature. Okay? If we go into tier 3, we will randomly be screening all students every day. Or excuse me, screening all students every day. And checking all of them when they come through the door. Again, this is just a cautionary measure to make sure that we're not spreading. Screening will help identify the symptoms of COVID and is a proactive and simple measure of preventing the spread of the virus. Now, one thing I want to make sure everybody understands is random means random. Because as we start school this fall, we know that we are going to be starting in tier 2 already. So we are randomly going to be screening students when they arrive. One day that might be 5 students in the school. The next day it might be 10. There's no rhyme or reason to what we're doing, just randomly taking temperatures of students and writing them down to keep a general idea or picture of what's taking place in the general population of the students. Okay?
Okay, the next slide looks actually rather small, but it is probably the meat and potatoes of everything that we are doing because we're here for the academics, we're here for the instruction, we're here for the learning of the kids. So the academics part includes plans to address the unfinished learning. We know fourth quarter there are skills that our students did not pick up. There are skills that were not maybe addressed, or there are skills that were not learned and learned to the depth that we want them. So we have to make sure that in our plan, we address that right at the very beginning of the year. We also have to look at that continuity of learning. So if we end up moving to a remote setting, how does that work? And making sure that it's effective, making sure that students are held accountable, making sure that attendance is a huge piece to that, and how are we going to take attendance in remote learning? As we also look at it is in the delivery of educational services to special populations too. How do we ensure that our students who are EL or our students who receive special education services, how do we ensure that those students are taken care of and that they are receiving the accommodations that they need and making sure that they are keeping on track, because that's a large part. One of the ways that we are doing, and we are starting day one, is teaching our kids what platforms we are using. So with PK through 12, or for 2, excuse me, so preschool through 2nd grade, we will be using the Seesaw platform. We are asking all parents and all families to make sure that they download the Seesaw app, because that is where the learning will take place. That is where the student experiences will happen. That's where things will be recorded. That is where things will be placed. That is where students will receive their information. So, if parents have that, students can receive it. So we need all parents to make sure that they have that on a device. You can download it on your phone. You can download it multiple places. Now, the other thing that we will be doing with all of our students is starting right away at the get-go. So when they come in, we will show them how to use Seesaw. So your kindergartner will understand how to use Seesaw. And one of the things that we have done is we have purchased devices, tablets at our K1, and made sure that our 2 through 12 have Chromebooks. So every child has a device in the classroom. They will be ready to go to that remote learning setting right away if we have to move to that, because we will be teaching them the tools that they need to make sure that they are successful. 3-12, we will be using Google Classroom, and that will be the platform where the students will find all their assignments. The nice thing about PK through 2 and 3 through 12 using similar platforms is it creates consistency. Because that is one thing that we know that we struggle with a little bit, maybe a lot, during fourth quarter. Where parents were like, okay, well this student's doing this student's doing that, and this student is doing something else, and I don't know how to help them. We want to make sure that the pieces that we use are things that that we help you understand. So we are planning on putting together informational pieces about how to use it, because that is huge. You have to be able to know how to help your child. You are their number one teacher, the parents are. And so we want to make sure that we give our parents those tools too. Tier 2 is really that in person with the academics. Tier 3 is the hybrid system. Tier 4 becomes when we go to remote learning. Now, some people may say, why in-person learning? Well, there's a couple reasons. One, officials have stated that school is in session in Nebraska. We know that some districts, depending on their location, their size, and their resources, are providing a hybrid system for families to choose in person or online. Most medium and smaller sized districts are providing in-person learning as recommended by legal counsel and public officials. 2, we know that there is a plan in place for students who have a 504 or an IEP, but that does not deem your child will receive this accommodation. If your child has an underlying health condition, please work with Mrs. Cordry Hoekstra to start the process to determine if that placement is appropriate. Number 3, when we surveyed parents, the majority of our parents surveyed stated that they are comfortable with students returning to school. So that was 92% of our parents, when surveyed, stated that they are comfortable. 4, the best learning takes place in the classroom. We know that one. Remote learning is a great option, but the best learning is actually in the classroom with the teacher. 5, in working with legal counsel, the best option is not to have a hybrid option for learning. It's either remote for all or in person for all. And 6, we will be posting curriculum guides for parents who choose to homeschool and have gone through the process with the Nebraska Department of Education. We will be working with posting our curriculum guides and our pacing guides to make sure that if you are choosing to homeschool for a semester, your child can keep right on track. So when they come back in January, they are set and ready to go. So as we look at these two, the couple of other things that have come up is attendance. Attendance is a huge part of this academic component because we know attendance matters, and we know that some parents are concerned about the 20 days and making sure that if I'm sick and I'm keeping my child home because of COVID, that the 20 days will not add up and I will not be in court with the district or with the county attorney. So any COVID-19 related student absence will not be counted as an unexcused absence. During a student's COVID-related absence, the student is expected, to the extent that he or she is able, we understand if the child is sick, they probably will not want to contact the teacher right away, but that they are to work with his or her teachers to obtain and complete coursework and assignments. We will be offering virtual learning for those students who are at home that maybe have been asked to quarantine or who are at home and are sick, so they can still participate in that piece. So, remote learning in Tier 3 and 4 will be structured. It will look a little different than remote learning did in quarter 4. There will be daily assignments. Attendance will be taken daily for all learners. Assessments will be given. Grades will be awarded. We will continue moving forward because we have to make sure that we continue meeting the standards and meeting the requirements that we are obligated to by the State Department of Education. Okay, moving on to transportation. So, transportation is how students will be transported on the bus and expectations while being transported. One of the things that we can see in the graphic on this slide is that the top bus has 7 red dots on it. If students do not wear masks on the bus, we can transport 7 kids on each of our buses. We do not want to transport just 7 kids on each of our buses because, first of all, that is fiscally responsible. And I think we have a few more than 7 kids or, maybe 70 students that need a bus. So, students riding the bus will be required to wear a mask while on the bus at Tier 2 and Tier 3. At Tier 3, we will have a para riding the bus as well, and then we'll be doing temperature checks. When we move into, or when we start at tier, and we're starting with 50% capacity currently with our buses. So we are looking at, there was a video about that, and we are looking at our pay-to-ride students will not receive transportation. We are looking at a lottery system if the buses are full, and right now I will tell you the buses are looking pretty good. We are asking that parents help. If they can transport their child, that would be awesome. If they can look at a neighbor or look at a friend to help out too, that would be fantastic. We're asking people to work together, people to find a solution so that we can transport students who absolutely need to, because there is no way, I'm not at home, I need my child to ride the bus. So that's what we're trying to do. If there is a way that you can help out in any way, shape, or form, that would be great. When we move to Tier 3, Tier 3, we will only be providing rides for our rural students and our special education students. According to state and federal statute, those are the two groups that we are mandated to provide transportation for. So at Tier 3, we will only be providing transportation for them. One thing to note, I'm going to say this again, July 31st is the last day to sign up for transportation. So if you have not signed up and you need transportation, please make sure that you sign up by July 31st. If you do not sign up by July 31st, you will not receive transportation until after Labor Day if there is a spot. So please, please, please make sure you sign up for transportation if you need it.
It's just kind of a funny aside about the transportation piece. As we started to talk about this, we hadn't really made any decisions. We were doing some research, we were talking about it, and I had to go get a haircut because, you know, it had been a while since you got one of those coming out of quarantine. And I was talking to the lady who was cutting my hair, and she said, "Oh, so what are you going to do about kids that ride the bus?" And I said, "Well, we're not quite sure. We're still researching it, trying to figure it out." She goes, "Well, if it's that big a deal, why don't you just ask the parents to help you out, and if they can get their kids to school, they can transport to school." So that's where the idea for our video came from, was just to simply ask parents for a little help until we get through this situation. So that's just kind of an aside to that. Next on our list is PPE, personal protective equipment. Basically, this includes the recommended or required PPE for students and staff to be worn during regular school operations. How? Masks and face shields, obviously. Anything that can help prevent the spread is what we're looking at doing, and providing multiple masks for students and staff as well as face shields for staff if they need it. So the bottom line here is the State Department of Education, or the state of Nebraska, is providing face shield or face masks for adult-sized face masks for every child, every student, and every staff member, that they are all adult size. So we have those coming, but the district themselves has purchased child-sized masks plus disposable masks, 3,000 disposable masks to have at hand to be able to provide masks for people. So if the question is out there about will the district be providing masks, yes, we will. We're going to need parents' help with laundering masks and taking care of the masks until obviously the day comes, which we know couldn't be any sooner, that we don't have to wear them anymore. But so we are going to be asking, because we're starting in Tier 2, that students and staff will be required to wear masks, but there will be an opt-out form. So I'm going to say that again. Staff and students will be required to wear masks at Tier 2, but parents will have the ability to opt their child out. Now there's a caveat to that you need to understand. This caveat has been explained to us through public health solutions. If COVID-19, if a student is contacted positive COVID-19, and that student's sitting in a classroom, and everyone in that classroom is wearing a mask except for one student, that student that's not wearing a mask When contract tracing is done and it comes back to that classroom, that student without a mask will be asked to quarantine longer than all the other students that are wearing a mask. And that's not our rule. That's a public health solutions rule. So you need to be aware of that. If you opt your child out and contract tracing leads back to a place where they were at in the school building, and you opted them out and they did not have a mask on, Public Health Solutions will be sending a letter asking you to quarantine your child for 14 days versus what could be a shorter term if they're wearing a mask. Okay, so I just want to make that clear. Tier 3, if we move to Tier 3, or in that case the dial moves to orange on the risk dial, we will be, opt-out forms will no longer be valid. In other words, we're saying, while in school, it's in the best interest of everybody for every child to have a mask on. So parent opt-out forms no longer become valid. Okay? Staff will be required to wear a mask or a face shield. And we also have different masks that are available for them that have windows on them, because we know that sometimes with hearing impaired students or some students need to read lips in order to learn better. So we'll be providing those types of masks for students that are in those situations, or for teachers that are in those situations as well. And teachers will have the option to wear a face shield if they choose, and a mask if they want to. But we are going to require them to wear some sort of cover. Why? Why are we doing this? Again, it gets back to the spectrum. One parent says, I'm not going to send my kid if they are required to wear a mask. The other one says, I'm not sending my student unless they are wearing a mask. Getting to the middle. The CDC says, CDC guidelines of reopening schools suggest that it's a safe and effective way to enable students and staff to conduct classes together when social distancing is difficult to maintain. Folks, you know classrooms, you were a student one time. Social distancing is difficult to maintain, so wearing a mask makes the most sense. Is it comfortable? No. Is it what I want to do? No. But is it what I believe is the most important thing for us to do? And our administrative team and all the professionals we've talked to have said it makes the most sense to do. Yes. So that's where we're at. If we're in Tier 2 where we're starting school and you choose to opt your student out, you need to understand the risk that comes with that, but you also need to understand that if we move to Tier 3, that option is no longer available. So we're trying to meet in the middle. And we're trying to follow the guidelines from the CDC, which does what we want it to do, and that's ultimately get kids back into school. Okay? This chart, this one here, was provided to us by, in our consultation with the Beatrice Community Hospital folks, which they have been absolutely phenomenal. We want to thank them, for any of them that are present or listening, for their ability and desire to work with us on everything. This chart right here just kind of explains things, so we'll be sending that home as well as to why masks are important. Okay?
Okay, looking at student, staff, safety, and procedures. There's a lot of procedures that we have wrapped up in here, and just kind of making sure that we ensure that we run and that we're safe. Making sure that we're doing things and using practices that continue to promote safety, making sure that we're washing our hands, that we are practicing good hygiene, that we're cleaning things, and that we are making sure that our surfaces and trying to keep it as germ-free as we possibly can. Looking at our operations, one of the things, we are not allowing visitors into the building unless they are extended school services. Extended school service visitors will be required to wear a mask, and they will also be screened when they come in. So this may mean someone from Blue Valley Mental Health coming to provide mental health services for some of our students. This might mean our students at the high school coming down to the elementary to take care of their cadet aid program and the requirements for that cadet aid program. That will be extended service providers will be allowed just in tier 1 and tier 2. Once we hit tier 3, they will not be allowed into the buildings. Parents, at this point in time, if you want to take your child out for lunch, you may do so. You need to ring the doorbell, pick them up, and then take them out of the building. We do not want you coming into the building. So we'll meet you at the door, we'll bring your child to you, and get your child can go to appointments, go out to lunch with you, and you can take care of that business when needed. The flow of the building is a huge component as we look at this. So do we have one-directional hallways? Do we make sure students walk on the right side rather than all around the hallway wherever they want? Do we release classes at certain points in time and release them at different points in time? So we are, again, trying to keep our students as limited in contact with other people. Tier 2 and Tier 3, when we look at the sharing of equipment and supplies, it is very limited. It is very limited. Things are sanitized in between sharing, so if we have to share computers, devices, everything will be sanitized and then put away, and then the next child will get it, and they can sanitize it before they use it, and then sanitize it when they are finished as well. Students will need to have their own water bottles. We will have extra refill stations at the schools, and so those will be there. Again, the water fountains will not be utilized. No large assemblies, so we will have classroom celebrations. We will have staff meetings that will take place on Zoom. Again, we are trying to keep our groups static and keep our groups together as much as we possibly can. Parent-teacher conferences will be held virtually. And again, we will take frequent hand washing and hygiene breaks. We talked about our masks. We will also take frequent mask breaks because we know, again, that there are times where you just have to take it off and get some fresh air. So as we look at it, we are saying our mask breaks need to happen within 45 to 60 minutes. So I should not be wearing my mask for more than 45 to 60 minutes without taking a break. The other thing that Mr. Alexander has wanted to bring up during the PPE talk was when we talked about public health solutions, one of our questions was, we know kids, I know even myself. There are times where I fidget with my mask and I'm not supposed to touch it. And one of the things I said, okay, so isn't that detrimental to our students? And Public Health Solutions said, here's the deal. A dirty mask is better than not wearing a mask at all. Because what's coming out of it is that your saliva, your spit, and so one of the things that with Public Health Solutions, when we talked about it, is the other piece that we will do is we will have extra masks. So if a child does have a soil mask, if it falls on the floor, we will replace that mask. We will make sure that they have a clean one. And that'll be part of the operation. Lunch. As we look at lunches, we will separate students as much as we possibly can. I know at the high school we have times where kids like to congregate, maybe 8, 10, maybe see how many kids they can get at one table. We will be looking at only 4 students at a table and making sure that we really monitor that social distancing piece. Everything will be pre-plated. We will have grab-and-go breakfasts, so when our students come to school, they will go directly to their classroom and head to their classroom with their grab-and-go breakfast and then be with their static group. So we will continue to monitor and try to keep, again, the static groups together as much as we possibly can. And just to make sure that we run in a way that is safe for all kids and for all staff members. Because as you look at that human resources, that's another huge component. If we start losing staff members because they have COVID symptoms or because they come down with COVID, it's very hard to run a school without staff. And we need them here. So that is one of the things that we are really looking at is how do we work with our staff members to make sure that they are safe, because we need them to be teaching, we need them in those classrooms, we need them with the students. Okay, so schedules, how do we look at this? Well, here is the deal. We will be starting in Tier 2, as you have probably picked up multiple times throughout the presentation. With our preschool and elementary, to reduce the contact, what we are looking at is students will remain in contact groups when indoors and outdoors. So our groups will have PE, will have recess at the same time, and they will not mingle. We will continue to try to keep them in that static group as much as possible. Middle school and high school will be looking at AP block scheduling. Currently, our middle school and high school had an 8-period day. Well, that's multiple times that our students are in the hallways, kind of connecting with each other. We wanted to limit that. So on the AP, on A day, I will have the periods of 1, 3, 5, 7, and on the B day, I will have a 2, 4, 6, 8. Class periods will run approximately 90 minutes, and we are working with the principals, with teachers, just to look at that schedule and figure out how do we structure that schedule, and how do we make sure that kids are still active and moving and learning throughout the whole time. If we move to Tier 3, here is what we are looking at. This is the schedule that we will be following if we move to Tier 3, where we have remote and in person. If we move to Tier 3, and this will be for everyone, Monday and Thursday, we'll have the household names A through L that will be attending school. Tuesday and Friday, we'll have the household names M through Z. Our principals have a document that have all the household names written down. So if you have a question, as you look at, maybe you have, maybe you have foster kids. Which household are they under? Call the principals, call the secretaries, we'll make sure that they have that information as well. Call the district office, just to make sure that you have the right day for Tier 3. As we look at middle school and high school, they will still run that block scheduling of A and B. Now, a question may come up. Why not look at having household names A through L come Monday, Tuesday, and then M through Z come Thursday, Friday? One of the things that we wanted to make sure of is that we continue to keep our kids in touch with us. And sometimes that week-long break is maybe too much. To make sure that they're still learning, to make sure that they're moving forward with their studies, to make sure that they're doing what they're needing to do, just to make sure that they get kind of that socialization, because we know mental health for all of our kids is huge. It is a very important factor. So we wanted to make sure that we touch base with our kids during the week, 2 times kind of spread out, rather than all at once and not see them for a whole other week.
We're getting closer, so thank you for bearing with us. We know this is a lot of information, but we're almost done. We've created a couple of flow charts because, again, one of the questions that will be going through your mind is, what happens if a student or a staff member contracts COVID? How are we going to handle that? Well, again, through our connections with Public Health Solutions and their diligent work, we've been able to get a hold of a flow chart that will explain that. So this flow chart, this information will all be sent to you as well, but this flow chart kind of explains that. A student with 2 of the following symptoms, fever, chills, cold, shivering, headache, muscle pain, sore throat, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or at least one of the following, new cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, loss of taste or smell. This student and staff who screen positive should be immediately isolated in the designated area and sent home as soon as possible. So basically, when we go through the symptoms checklist, which also will be sent home to you, if any of those things happen while they're at school, then we're just going to get them isolated, get a mask, make sure they have a mask on, and call you and ask you to come get them. And then we're going to ask you to require the symptomatic person to wear a cloth or surgical mask while waiting if tolerable. And then before they can come back to school, as we scroll down, there is some things that we're going to ask you to be monitoring. So if the staff member or the student is symptomatic staff or student who tests positive, that's this box right here, we're going to exclude them for 10 days from the onset of the symptoms and only allow them to return 24 hours after fever resolution if present and respiratory symptoms have improved. If the staff member or student is not tested, we're going to exclude them for 10 days from symptoms onset and only allow to return 24 hours in fever resolution if present and improved respiratory symptoms. may return to school if a doctor establishes an alternative diagnosis and meets the school's requirements for readmission. So basically, if they go to the doctor and the doctor says, no, this is not COVID, this is strep throat, okay, then they would be allowed to come to school, assuming that their fever and symptoms have subsided. Over on the far side, you're right, the symptomatic staff student who tests negative, we're just asking them to be excluded until they're fever-free without the use of fever-reducing medications for 24 hours or meets the school's requirements for readmission and improved respiratory symptoms. So, which is pretty similar to what we do now. If a student comes to us with a fever, we ask you to keep them home until they are past those fever-added symptoms with no fever-reducing medications. So, there is no reason for a student or staff member to get a negative test to be cleared for return to school. This comes directly from our public health solutions, folks. So this is not our chart. This is what we've gotten from the professionals, medical professionals who have educated us. So this is a flow chart that will be sent to you. And then the last flow chart that we have up here, basically we spent predominantly this evening talking about students. Now we know there's a lot of people in here, and I see some familiar faces that are staff members, and we haven't spent a lot of time talking to you about them, but we do have plans in place for them that basically relate back to a couple different things. First of all, it's going to be federal guidelines, it's going to be state guidelines, it's going to be negotiated agreement, it's going to be policy. So this flow chart has been provided to us by Perry Law Firm, and it just basically walks through what's going to happen if a staff member either tests positive or shows symptoms of COVID and tests negative maybe. So we will be disseminating all this information to staff members in the coming weeks. So if you are a teacher or a paraeducator or one of the other members of our staff, team members out there, just know that we will be providing this information to you in the form of email and then also covering it with you as we get ready to start the year back. But we wanted to show you this just simply because I think it's important to know that our COVID task force team really has tried to go the extra mile to prepare and look at as many scenarios as possible to address this pandemic that we're living with. And I guess with that, I think that brings us to our close. We will allow you some time for questions. It kind of brings us to the end of our conversation. But as we start questions, I would just remind everybody of this. Remember where we start. And remember this. Not a single person up here asked for this pandemic. Not a single person in this room asked for the pandemic. And so as we move through it, it's important to remember that we're doing the best that we can. We want to do the best that we can for your students. We want to do the best that we can for our staff members because ultimately we care about each and every one of them, and we want them back in school where they belong, and we need your help and cooperation with that as we move forward. So, Board of Education members, thank you for your patience tonight. I know you've heard this a couple different times, or you've seen bits and pieces of this. This is a product as we bring it to you, and we thank you for your patience, and we would entertain questions from anyone at this time. And Doris, I'll turn it back over to you.
For the public forum portion of the meeting, I'd like to remind people to come down to the microphone, please state your name and address, and a reminder that there's a time limit of 5 minutes per speaker allowed. So, is someone wanting to address the board?
May I ask a quick question from someone who's watching the live stream?
Yes.
Said that the images were really blurry, so it was hard to view on the YouTube page. Will this slideshow be available somehow to the public after tonight's meeting?
Yes, we can put that on the website.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Southwick. 113 on the court. Just a simple question. When you guys talked about tier 3 and Monday, Thursday, whatever, what happens to Wednesdays?
Wednesdays are used for cleaning, and then Wednesdays are also a virtual online day. So students will be given virtual assignments, they'll be able to check in with their teachers, but it will be used for cleaning purposes to make sure we really clean our buildings and get them up and ready for that next run on Thursday.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board?
Jenny Hanshaw, 16096 South 82nd Pickle. What if a household member tests positive? Do I keep all my kids home?
Good question. Basically, if a household member tests positive, a couple different things will happen. You'll receive a letter from the Public Health Solutions, or depending on where you live, if that's Public Health Solutions, you'll receive a letter that will probably request that any member of your family that's been at home with them quarantine. At that time, we're just asking for cooperation that you adhere to those requirements or those requests by Public Health Solutions to do that. If there is no letter, then we're just asking for you to communicate with us and work with us on making sure that we can monitor and help monitor the students' well-being or the family members' well-being.
Or if like one of my kids is sent home from school, they all come home, or can I release, people back in, household groups, I guess? Just, there's not clear-cut guidelines, I guess, is that right?
That's correct. If there's no positive test, then really it just becomes a complete monitoring situation and communication partnership.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
RJ Crandall, 723 North 7th Street here in Beatrice. How do we know we're already starting Tier 2, I guess, is my first question, when it's 3 weeks away from school. To my knowledge, we don't have a whole lot of active cases in Gage County right now, and we have a few. So where's the delineation on the Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3? Who makes that decision? I mean, I know Public Health Solutions has a part of that. But I'm struggling a little bit trying to understand why we're starting in Tier 2 when I don't believe we have active cases in the district at the moment.
Well, without going too much into detail, I would tell you that we do have active cases in the district at this point. So, and I obviously can't release names.
Sure.
And also we have several other members that are in the process of being tested.
Okay.
And so, just on the sake of the side of air caution, and also knowing that the risk style currently is in the yellow, we thought it was best to start the year in Tier 2. And also, just to be honest with you, RJ, one of the things that we are being told is that by Public Health Solutions is that they don't anticipate the risk style ever going back down to green or level Tier 1 until we have a vaccination in place.
Okay.
So, good question.
All right, that brings up a whole other set of questions I have 5 minutes. Anyway, a lot of really interesting questions on that one. The next thing, you talk about the opt-out situation. I never did hear, if they wear a mask, how long do they have to quarantine if they're wearing a mask?
If they're wearing a mask, it will be a significant less amount of time. A lot of that will depend on the quarantine measure that could be established by Public Health Solutions. But within the flow chart, we're going to ask to monitor that. If they're not symptomatic, then they can come back the next day.
Okay. So that brings me to my conversation that through secondhand, through DHHS, where they talked about secondary exposure, where you talk about in class, if they're traced to a class. Now, DHHS says that if you're not in direct physical contact within 6 feet of someone, that's considered a secondary exposure. And short of taking your temperature twice a day, you shouldn't have to quarantine. So I'm trying to understand, how close is too close in the school? How far away is too far away in the school? How are we going to define that? And then, if they are deemed too close, can they test within 48 hours to determine if they're a carrier or not and be cleared? Or how does that, I mean, I'm assuming you guys have worked through all that, I just didn't hear what that would be.
It's a great question, and to be honest with you, our goal is going to be to maintain the 6 feet social distancing, but I think that's a goal that we all know is going to be very difficult to do because we know kids, and they're social creatures, and they like to talk to each other, they like to touch each other, they like to be close to one another. So as much as we can maintain that in a classroom setting, we're going to try and do that. Obviously, that's not going to be perfect. And also in playground setting, that's not going to be perfect. So we're going to try to do that, but probably not likely that that's always going to happen. If a letter is sent, again, I get back to the letter primarily from Public Health Solutions or any other health solutions to a family, then when it gets to a contract tracing situation, then we will obviously have to turn those names over to them. They will request those names of all the students within that class to be able to do the contract tracing they need to. So I don't know if that answers your question about the quarantine or not.
Well, I guess part of my question always is the testing question. Is it blanket 14 days? Well, if they can test and prove that they're not a carrier, does that need to apply if they can test and prove that they're not a carrier?
The testing will obviously help. The thing that we're up against, honestly, is we know that the testing protocol is not necessarily going to work in our favor in terms of a quick turnaround. So we're being told that tests right now, because Beatrice has done so much testing, which is a great thing, I guess. But we're being told that they're being ratcheted back down to only a certain number of tests they can submit to a daily basis to DHHS. And so that's going to impact the timing of all of it as well.
Sure, I understand that, but I also know that there are some tests out there that maybe aren't available in Dade County or Beatrice that you can do some rapid testing, and obviously there's expenses associated with that. All I'm asking is if we can prove that they're not a carrier through testing, can they be allowed back into school?
I think if it's cleared by a medical practitioner, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. I think I'll yield my time. So.
Susie Witolski, 8021 West Scott Road. And I have 2 questions. The first one is, you touched on virtual learning and remote learning last quarter. If we do go remote, is it going to be like Zoom or something that's going to have a little more requirement for the kids because I'm working another 2 and I can't be home to monitor that? And when they tell me they're done with their homework and I verify it, it doesn't seem like they did very much. I'm just here for like 5 minutes.
Absolutely. So that, yes, it will be either Zoom or Google Meet. But we also realize that we will have families and households with maybe 3 kids, 2 kids, or maybe the parents are even working at home and we all need to be on the computer at once. That doesn't really work well with your internet or, with that connectivity. So our teachers will be recording their lessons. So if the kids cannot make it on at that particular time, they need to watch the recording later and then check back in with that teacher so that teacher can record them as positive attendance, because that's huge. But yes, we will be asking them to be present and to be accountable for things constantly.
And my second question is, I'm going to get asked this when I get home. Academics are first, but activities, how does that play into any of these tiers? Because they want to obviously participate in sports and other activities. Thanks.
Great question. And a lot of the activities at this point, because they're overseen by the NSAA, we're just simply following the NSAA guidelines. And when the NSAA comes out and says, whatever their decision is, right now their decision is we're planning to move forward full steam ahead, but at any time that changes, then we'll obviously be in communication with the students, the parents, and let them know what the NSAA tells us.
Would anyone else like to address the board?
Go right Beatrice, I have a question. That again came from somebody watching. If we go to tier 4, will teachers be expected to go on Zoom for a certain amount of minutes per day or week per class with their students?
If we go on tier 4, one of the things that our teachers will be expected to do is they will teach the content. So they will be the direct givers of the content. So yes, they will be, there will probably not be a set requirement amount of time that they have to be on Zoom, but they will deliver the instruction. They will follow up with the students. They will make sure that students are receiving the material, that students are going through the material, that they are understanding it. They will be working a lot more closely with the students if we are in tier 4, just to make sure that we are moving forward and make sure that our students are grasping all the concepts.
There are other questions?
A family would elect to have their child wear a face shield. Is that in addition to a mask, or maybe they wear the face shield instead of a mask?
I know that we have looked at the effectiveness of a face shield, and I know that it is not as effective, but it still is, there is still some effectiveness to it. So we would look at if students would rather wear a face shield that is a face covering, so that would be, it would be an option. We would just ask that if they are going to be in an area, like maybe it's a small group, that they maybe look at putting on a mask for that small group when they are closer to the other students and cannot be as far apart away with that face shield. I received a question through Facebook. The question is, will the transition house still be in effect? And according, Mrs. Suxtra, isn't that a no?
Well, we don't have the lease for the choice program, so there'll still be a choice program, and they just be stationed in one classroom.
So-
You need to come to the microphone. We can't hear that.
I'll repeat what, so the contract with Mosaic will not be occurring because Mosaic wants that house just in case they have patients that, or their residents that would test positive for COVID, correct?
Right.
And then, so we are looking at using a classroom, we're looking at other places that we can make sure that we will still have the transition program and the choice program. We are looking at making sure that our kids still have access to all that they need to do to be prepared.
Could I ask with the rest of the questions, if we have more questions and we have the person's name? If we're asking the people here to give their names, I think it's only fair that these questions, that a name be attached to them.
Yes.
We have a question from Courtney Hasse. Will you provide computers for students who do not have them? And the answer to that question is yes.
The other piece that we are looking at providing for families is internet access. If families deem that they need internet access, because we know that there are some places that they need hotspots and other pieces, so we have been looking into that as a district as well.
Catherine Katz, 124 Regency Drive. A couple questions. What are we going to do about addressing the education gap with students as they return? Are we going to do testing initially, and then are we going to do separate kids within classes on ability? Are there going to be small groups with paras? What's your plan for that?
So to address students when they return, we will assess them. We will get them back in. We will not assess them on day one because we don't believe that that's the way to start school. But we will assess them right away after we start school because, one, we need to know where they are. We need to know where they're coming in. We need to know where their gaps are. The other thing that our teachers have been doing this month is working with the grade below and working with their current grade to figure out, okay, what standards are you most concerned that when the students left your grade last year or your subject area last year that they may not have done. And so now we're trying to figure out a way to bring that in during the first couple of weeks just to make sure that they get those standards and then we come back to them and revisit them before we start moving on. So we will assess, but then we will also look at small groups in classrooms just to make sure that, again, we get the students with same group and work on the skills they need to work on. They'll work with parents, they'll work with their teacher directly. One of the things that we will try to do is make sure that para stays with that group and works with that group. So we're going to provide multiple ways. If we need to, we'll look at other things other resources such as title or special education, just to, again, help us continue to fill those gaps, because we've got to make sure we address those.
And are there plans to bring in more paras to help with this, or do you feel like you have sufficient paras right now to meet those needs?
At this point in time, there aren't plans to bring in additional paras, and I think that our paras do an amazing job and our teachers do an amazing job, and I think they will address, I know that they will address the needs of our students.
Probably have enough time. Last question is about masks. For people who choose to have masks, I know there's other schools that are requiring solid colored masks. Are there going to be specific directives on masks? And if there's people want to bring clips or holders to, will there be anything required or not required or allowed along with those guidelines for masks?
It just has to meet the dress code. So your mask can be as fun as you want it, it just has to meet the dress code.
Thank you.
While this gentleman's approaching, we have another question via the live stream from Ryan Houlihan Johnson. Mr. Jansen, I will forward this question to you, but could Lincoln and Stoddard stagger start times so I don't have a late child or one waiting after school? I'll let you reach out to him, but I think the answer to that would be our school times are pretty much set, but we will be willing to set up arrangements if necessary to help supervise those children because we know there could be those situations where that happens. My answer, Ryan, would be reach out to Mr. Jansen and he'll work with you on getting something set up.
Joseph Brewer, 1201 North 11th Street, Beatrice. I guess since you brought up that Public Health Solutions indicated kind of no ability to move beyond Tier 2 without vaccination, I'll just ask the question, which is, are you guys looking at then turning around and mandating vaccines if they become available during the school year?
Good question. The answer to that would be, it wouldn't be us that would mandate vaccines. That would have to come from someone that is of a higher pay grade than myself. So the answer to that is we wouldn't mandate that. That would have to be, if that became a directed health measure through either implementation of the President of the United States or the Governor, then we would have to follow through with that. But that's the only way we'd be able to do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm Robin Martinez, 1903 Monroe Street, Beatrice. I've looked everywhere, maybe I'm a fool and I can't find it, but where do we access the rest dial? The only one that I can find, even on my Beatrice Daily Sun's website, is Lincoln's. So where do we find that? Will that be available on your website? What's the best way?
Great question, Robin, and we do have plans to link that to our website to make it easy for parents. But Public Health Solutions, I think Dr. Nielsen's pulling that up right now. It should be on there. Right there.
May I ask a question? Yeah, may I ask a question? Maybe I should just look this up because I can't read that.
It looks like the questions are done, so we'll close the public forum portion of the meeting. At this point, I'd like to ask Mrs. Byers to please read the resolution that we'll be voting on.
Whereas the school district was closed during a portion of the 2019-2020 school year based on the statewide outbreak of COVID-19, and whereas the President and the Governor have declared a state of emergency, response to the novel coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the directed health measures currently in place allow the school facilities to be reopened in person student attendance. And whereas since the end of the 2019-2020 school year, district administrators and staff members have worked diligently with key stakeholders and groups, including public health officials and medical experts, to develop a plan to return to in-person student instruction during the 2020-2021 school year. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to support student learning while taking reasonable precautions to keep students, staff, and administrators safe. And whereas in order for the district to effectively and timely respond to the ever-changing COVID-19 situation, the board hereby desires to delegate certain authority and decision-making responsibility to the superintendent or superintendent's designee, so that the superintendent or superintendent's designee may continue to plan for and ultimately implement without delay a return to in-person instruction during the 2020-2021 school year. Whereas the school district is also completing reopening plans with contingencies for changes in circumstances, but for the time being, the Board of Education believes it is important to address these critical issues to assist the administration in preparing for plans when school resumes. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education has determined as follows. Site for instruction. Student instruction will occur in person in the classroom unless otherwise required by law. All students who are enrolled in the school district must attend school on all days when school is open for in-person instruction, unless the student's illness makes attendance impossible or impractical, or is otherwise excused by board policy. Beatrice Public Schools will operate under appropriate laws for students with IEP plans and 504 plans that have medical conditions signed off on by a licensed medical practitioner. Masks. All district teachers, staff, employees, and volunteers must wear face coverings at all times unless the nature of the instruction or other activity makes face covering unsafe or impossible. Employees who suffer from a disabling condition that necessitates a reasonable accommodation to this requirement must notify their supervising administrator immediately of the employee's physical or mental impairment and the accommodation the employee seeks. All students must wear face coverings at all times unless one of the following exception applies. The student has a disability and a reasonable accommodation excuses the student from wearing a mask for some or all of the school day. The student's individualized education program, IEP, team has determined that wearing a mask for some or all of the school day would interfere with the student's ability to receive a free, appropriate public education, and that determination is documented in the student's IEP. The student's Section 504 committee has determined that wearing a mask for some or all of the school day would interfere with the student's ability to receive a free, appropriate public education, and that determination is documented in the student's Section 504 plan, or another legally valid reason exists to excuse the student from the face covering requirement, and such reason has been approved in writing by the building principal. Must wear face coverings at all times unless their parent or guardian has opted their student out of being required to wear a mask by executing a written document, and such document is on file in the office of the principal at the time of issue. Understanding that if masks are required by government mandate or entrance into Tier 3, the opt-out form becomes invalid. Leave and staff attendance. Employees will be permitted to take leave, paid or otherwise, provided by the terms of employment, staff contract, negotiated agreement, etc., and as provided by law in the ADA, FMLA, FFCRA, etc. The superintendent or superintendent designee is authorized to take all reasonable and necessary action to implement this resolution without further action of the board. If there is any conflict between this resolution and any provision of board policy or of staff or student handbooks, the terms of this resolution shall control. Now, expiration of the 2020-2021 school year.
Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Byers,
Yes.
Chadwick,
Hold on, are we voting on this right now? Without, okay, I have additional,
Oh,
I have a ton of questions. I just wanted to wait for the public comment period, so I would not like to vote right now.
Oh, I got the question with the comment.
I didn't want to speak when the public was.
That's fine. Okay, well, I guess we should stop then and let, no, we want your questions answered.
So what I was trying to read up on the board, Public Health Solutions, according to that chart, this is regarding face coverings. They're recommending them for symptomatic people. So I'm confused as to why, if we're starting in tier 2, why are we requiring our students to wear face coverings? And it does say as well, suggested when unable to distance. But according to the CDC, I think their current guidelines are to remain 6 feet apart. And if you're in contact with someone for longer than 15 minutes, then you would need a face covering. So I'm curious why we moved to a mask requirement, because I've got like 10 follow-up questions after that.
Good question. And I think the thing, we know these are all recommendations, but we also know that, and I don't know if the slide is available, that according to science, the longer you're around somebody, whether they're a carrier, they know they're a carrier or not a carrier, the more apt the exchange of materials is. And so the science of it tells us that we're better off to have masks on than not.
So are we going to continue to wear masks during flu season every year following this year? Because children are more susceptible to influenza than they are to COVID.
I think until we have a vaccine for COVID, it's in our best interest to wear a mask, because the flu, even though children are more susceptible to it, the flu does have a vaccine.
Okay. Sorry, I wrote down a lot of questions.
That's okay.
Just throughout the presentation. How are we going to enforce proper mask use or etiquette? Are students going to be required, because if you look at documentation on how to properly wear a mask, if you touch it, you're going to wash your hands or use hand sanitizer. Are we going to ensure that every student does that after touching their mask? Or I think you answered the question, what happens if the mask is soiled, but what if a student drops it 5 times and the 5 masks that they have been allotted by the state are gone in a matter of a day? What do we do?
Another great question. And I think with all things considered, the best answer to that question is that when it comes to the mask expectations, obviously I don't want to be the mask police. I don't want to ask our teachers to be the mask police. And I think with the different age levels of students that we deal with, we have probably a little bit different expectation. And to be quite honest with you, with students who are of the younger age, and we're not requiring preschool students to wear masks. I don't know if we said that or not, so just in case anybody's listening, preschool students will not be required to wear masks. With younger students, we're obviously going to have to use this as a teachable moment, as we call it in education. And the teachable moment is that we're doing this to protect ourselves and protect everybody else, yourself and everyone else included. And so as we teach it, if there's a behavior we expect students to learn, or in this case, children to learn, we have to be willing to be patient and teach that lesson and get back to the education piece of it and why it's important to learn. For our older students, I think that discussion changes a little bit. Currently, we have a cell phone policy in our high school, and I will thank Mr. Suter for this idea. I think we're going to have to re-norm everyone as we come back. And as we re-norm people, obviously there's going to be a time period that we say, hey, you don't have a mask on, you don't have an opt-out form. If you don't want to wear a mask, you need to get your parents to sign an opt-out form. We need to have you put the mask on. If high school students choose not to do that, in my opinion, that's direct insubordination of their parents' wish and a school rule, so we have to handle that through different measures. Obviously, the days are over when we can use the real Board of Education, so we just have to take the opportunity to teach them and then work with them beyond that if they choose not to follow the rules.
There are a lot of studies showing that improper mask use can be more detrimental than the virus itself. So I just have some concerns about students requiring it. But I do like that there is an opt-in clause put in there. And I hope the parents will utilize that if that's what they choose to do. So you said that COVID student absences aren't counted against a student. How will any other illnesses be counted? So if a student is out for 14 days with COVID at the beginning of the year, what happens if they get the flu, in December? Would those absences be counted against them, or will they be excused as well? Because there's going to be a lot of sickness, just like every year, but now we have an additional one to worry about.
Very difficult delineation between the two, but I think what we will rely upon at that point is the advice of a medical practitioner and a note from the medical practitioner to determine that this is a COVID-related absence versus a flu-related absence.
And then you made a point about the child either wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. Quarantine days would be different. Are all of those days excused no matter what the student is doing regarding facial covering?
Correct.
Okay.
The main thing I think with the student that's going to be quarantined is that if they are quarantined, whether it's by parental request or by public health solutions request or DHHS request, is that they understand they still have a responsibility to being present through the remote learning.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Just one. Regarding transportation, buses are at 50% capacity for getting to school, correct? How are shuttle buses going to work, and how are buses going to work for getting students to extracurricular activities?
Shuttle buses we'll be running 2 shuttle buses in this building so that we can keep them at that 50% capacity, so we are adding that part. So we're spreading the kids out with 2 shuttle buses from each location, so there will be 2 at Lincoln and then 2 at Stoddard going over. And then with our extracurricular activities, we will be taking more buses.
Will we have enough staff to man the buses?
That's what we are working on and making sure that we do, absolutely. Yeah, because that is a concern, and then, extracurricular activities, we want them to happen, and we all want them to continue to move forward, so let's hope that everything stays the course.
And extracurricular activities, I will tell you that it's going to be a challenge, but we're going to have to rely on our coaching staff and our extracurricular activity drivers to work a tight schedule to make sure that we adhere to that 50% capacity.
Would a parent have an option to take their child to an activity or to a game or something instead of riding a bus?
We currently have not broached that, but that's probably a question for legal consideration that we would have to get consultation from legal counsel to move forward with an idea like that. I will tell you, in late breaking news today, as we were preparing for this, there are some schools that have opted to not have middle school activities at this point, so they're going to do more of an in-house intramural schedule, and although that's probably not optimal, what we would like to see, as that starts to evolve, that could be one of the changes that we get faced with here in the near future as well.
Are you comfortable voting now?
Sorry.
No.
I just think we should probably have some discussions outside of that. I'm good. I'm
Thank
cold
you.
though. You guys, it's freezing.
Yeah, it's cold up here. Thank you for the questions. I think they're important, and we obviously want to make sure that we give everybody a chance to ask them.
Were there any other questions of board members? Okay. Jackson, continue, please.
Okay, Chadwick,
No.
Trustee, Winter,
Yes.
Peeper,
Yes.
Martin.
Yes. Motion passes 5-1. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I move that the Board of Education of District 15 adjourn.
Chadwick?
Yes.
Trustee? Winter? Keeper? Martin?
Yes.
Myers?
This meeting is adjourned.
Amy,